You became the chief executive.
I became the chief executive.
Was that a job you'd ever done before?
No.
As the recruitment process came to an end, Pilger returned from Australia and discovered, to his horror, that none of the journalists he'd recommended had joined the paper.
John Pilger completely floored me by saying that I was out to destroy him, that I was, trying to take over the project and leave him out of it. Well, if anybody had been left out in the cold or the heat of the Australian desert, it was him, because he'd gone there.
He told me that he was the editor and he wasn't acknowledging me as editor-in-chief. Told me straight out. He said, you're not even going to have an office there. It was a straight, I'm in, you're out. This was a coup d'etat. Not much equal opportunity there.
With his team of newly employed journalists, Keith Sutton began producing dummy papers. What the dummies revealed was that his vision for the paper was at odds with the serious left-wing dream of the paper's creators.
We would have lots of humour, with lots of lively pages, lots of pictures, and did not, and this is important, did not want to push politics so openly down people's throats.
Keith Sutton had begun producing dummies, and frankly they were terrible. And they alarmed me and they alarmed John Pilger. And so what was agreed was that John and I would produce a different dummy, and then people could decide. And so we produced our few pages, and they were very, very different.
Did he know you were producing a rival?
Oh, yes. This was done very openly. This was not done behind the scenes. This was proper decisions,
Him and Alan Hayling produced their own rival dummy. Unbeknown to you?
Totally unbeknown to me. There was no way it was done in any constructive form. It was done in a way to hit not just me at that time, but the whole editorial enterprise in Manchester.
So that was very undermining?
Absolutely, yeah. It was totally destructive, and that was the intention.
Can you explain why you did that? And I suppose there's an argument that, it was rather undermining of the editor you'd appointed.
Well, he had to be undermined. It was a dreadful dummy. The whole thing had to be undermined, stopped. There are millions of pounds of people's money, of little people who'd given to this, trade unionists. The moment Alan and I saw that initial dummy, we knew it was a disaster.
In democratic News on Sunday style, the two rival dummies were presented to the board and to the Founders Committee.
My reaction, without any comedy to it, was that I thought Keith was joking. And John Pilger's come in. It was a completely different world. There was no arguments. Which example should actually be a representative of what was going out in the future? And that was John Pilger's.
They agreed, almost unanimously, I think it was unanimously, that there wasn't any contest between the two dummies, that the one that I'd drawn up with Alan was the way we want to go. I proposed that we cut our losses and pay Keith off and start again.
So you wanted him sacked at that point?
Yes.
But the way the paper was structured meant that no one could sack the editor without the founders' say-so.
I think the Founders Committee met and they came to this kind of extraordinary decision, which was that Keith Sutton should be told to produce a newspaper along the lines of the Hayling-Pilger dummy. And that was their decision. And of course, as a result, John Pilger resigned instantly, absolutely instantly. And so should have I, but I didn't.
Having walked out, Pilger went public and penned a series of articles attacking the paper.
He walked away and frankly stabbed us in the back. I think it was vindictive and it was an extremely nasty thing to do.
That decision to go public was considered a terrible act of betrayal. Why did you go public?
Well, the act of betrayal was on the part of those who had turned this dream into a really tatty left-wing Sun. It wasn't even left-wing. That was the betrayal.
The chances of the thing succeeding were 5 to 10% probably anyway. That 5 and 10% was narrowed to, I would say, 1 to 2% by John Pilger then going outside of our tent and lobbing hand grenades at us.
News on Sunday will support workers and their trade unions when they take industrial action, except insofar as action is in direct conflict with the principles of the Charter.
News on Sunday opposes the imposition of suffering on animals in pursuit of profit or pleasure.
The paper will support groups of people seeking to gain more control over their own lives.
Tell me about the advertising campaign. In an inspired move, News on Sunday hired Bartle, Bogle and Hegarty to do their advertising. They were a fashionable young agency, best known at the time for their Levi's campaign.
We were excited about the fact that there was this trendy advertising agency who was going to do this campaign for us.
Well, when we've met the team from the News on Sunday, obviously that there was a tremendous amount of passion in what they were trying to do, which is great, which is really good, which you need that when you're launching any brand. Doesn't matter what you're doing, from toothpaste to newspapers. I mean, you have to have passion behind what you're trying to do. So there was an opportunity, I felt, for us. And I said to the team, why don't we focus on this idea that, we're not going to have a page 3 girl, and actually we're going to have quite gutsy political writing. And out of that emerged the line, no tits but lots of balls, which I thought was a fabulous line. I thought it was one of the best lines that we'd ever written.
I remember this John Hegarty coming, this flash, advertising guy, blonde hair and sharp suit and everything, up from London, And we were all assembled and we had to watch this video presentation, and, which had obviously cost an absolute fortune.
When we actually saw this line, no tits but a lot of balls, there was sort of sharp intakes of breath and feeling, well, we really can't go with this.
There was a kind of stunned silence. There was a kind of an even greater fear. You could sort of saw fear across their faces. Oh my God, the reality of it.
An awful lot of people didn't like it. They were appalled. The more sort of earnest, if you like, people on the project, and I think probably certainly some of the feminists, although not all of them necessarily, just thought this was terrible, 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 and to the extent of threatening to resign if it was used.
It seemed to undermine everything that we were trying to achieve at that time. We weren't going to be the Mirror, the Sun. We weren't going to go to the lowest denominator. We were going to be an intelligent newspaper, but which was tabloid, which was small, with vocabulary that could be understood by everybody. So to have a no-tits campaign was just aping the enemy.
What was your reaction to that?
I thought it was appalling. I really did. I mean, it's clever and sexy and all those kind of things, but I mean, it was anathema to, I thought, what the politics of that paper and the equal opportunities intent of the organisation.
Can you explain why?
Because it's making a sort of crude allusion to women and their sexual parts of their body in order to sell a newspaper. I mean, it's no better than putting a nude on the top of a car at a car show. It seems to me it's raising the sexual frisson in order to sell something which has nothing to do with sex.
In the end, News on Sunday settled for a watered-down version of the campaign. The TV ads, however, inexplicably featured references to the tits and balls of the defunct slogan.
Hello, John Blunt. I hand you the truth. And so does News on Sunday. A new paper that's on our side. News on Sunday will have football, snooker balls, tennis balls, hockey balls. In fact, pages and pages of sport. And it'll expose everything. Except girls on page 3. So, if you want the naked truth instead of naked women, read News on Sunday. This Sunday.
The debacle over the advertising campaign revealed a deeper problem at the paper. Namely, that there was no effective leadership, and decisions were being made by committee.
The structure of the organisation was ridiculous, the decision-making structure. There was the slap of firm management was totally absent. There was always somebody else you could appeal to. No decision ever seemed to be final. And you had this awful problem with people would make a statement in one meeting which would accept a practical idea or would back something, and then they would make a statement to another meeting where they'd hammer away on the left-wing principles and how, we can't change, we mustn't do this is utterly, utterly wrong. It didn't make for smooth running.
But why is a picture of a demo going to be a good picture?
Well, I've said there might be, because the demos that are taking place in London usually end up outside the police station.
So you had the likes of Keith Sutton, Colton Lee, me, all arguing about our causes, but actually they were all clashing. What we needed was a leader who said, look, I hear what you say, but this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, the problem with this piece is that it's showing working class people again as victims. I don't think we can let it go like that.
Well, I don't think it does, and we've got some very positive comments there from some of the unemployed people.
The leader they might have looked to was Alan Hayling, but he was no longer chief executive. Since Pilger's departure, he'd reinvented himself as editorial director.
He changed titles and responsibilities throughout the period I was there, usually due to criticisms of various groups, or possibly all groups, of his activities and behaviour. So it was a very odd situation. There was this man who everybody thought was running the organisation. Even if he said he wasn't, they would always turn to him thinking that he was, and even if he wasn't supposed to be running the organisation, he would be always interfering and trying to run it.
I'd say I was able to have practically no influence whatsoever on the way that the paper developed from January. None. Really none.
So you were trying to have influence?
But nobody was listening.
Hayling had a very theoretical, political idea about what the paper should be. And I just think, a lot of the kind of crap that he was talking about is the kiss of death to a broad... a paper that's going to appeal to a broad audience. A lot of the kind of things that he might have been concerned about, people out there couldn't give a piss about. I'm not interested in.
I think it was the great divide, which was always problematic for News on Sunday, in which the founders, the people who had this great sort of political dream for a newspaper, and then the workers who were actually trying to produce it, and these conflicts became evident as we moved towards publication.
If we persist in using these left-right terms, these were people who were way out here. I hesitate to use the word loony, but it was a very popular word at the time.
You'd see them because they would wander around the newsroom, sort of vaguely checking up on people, I suppose. I remember one of them coming up to me saying, "Who are you? And what are you supposed to be doing?" And me saying, "Oh, who are you?" And he said he was a founder. And he had some sort of badge on. I think he had a picture of Lenin on it.
I think most of the staff, there was a kind of resentment, but then unsure of just what were we about, what we were doing there. Here was a group of people that weren't getting paid, that had these powers. It was phenomenal.
Do you think that the founders were equipped to help sort out the content of the paper?
We were more able than I think the journalists, because it's the people who make cars are not the ones who say it's the best car in the world. It's the people who buy them. They're the ones who actually judge them. And with a newspaper, it's the same thing, and News on Sunday was exactly the same.
For us, though, it was how are you going to put in the ideas embraced in the editorial charter? That was the main thing.
But the weekly dummies that Sutton was continuing to produce were reinforced